This is NC Continental Prime. I'm Sulaiman Aled. We begin in the Horn of Africa, where the World Food Programme says its first aid convoy since the signing of a landmark deal between Ethiopia's government and Tigrayan rebels has arrived in the Tigray region. The restoration of aid deliveries to Tigray was a key part of the agreement signed in South Africa to end the two-year conflict that has unleashed a humanitarian crisis in northern Ethiopia. The WFP says 15 trucks entered the region on Wednesday, with more expected in the coming days. The agency says the convoy traveled along a route through neighboring Amara for the first time since June of 2021. On Tuesday, a medical aid convoy from the International Committee of the Red Cross has also arrived. Mukesh Kapila, Professor Emeritus, University of Manchester, and Teklai Gebremichael, an Associate Editor, TGHAT, both join me to unpack these latest development. Good to see you both. And quickly here, following peace talks in South Africa and Nairobi, the Ethiopian government and rebels have agreed to allow immediate humanitarian access to Tigray and other regions in the north. Now, will this significantly shift the dynamics of the crisis? Let's start with you, Professor.
I think it's good news that some humanitarian assistance, food and medicine, has been allowed by Ethiopia to enter Tigray. Now, if we've seen this before, in that we had intermittent shipments of aid. If this assistance is sustained and its distribution is unrestricted, then it's a very good sign for confidence in building up the peace agreement that's been signed, or the truce that has been signed. Yes.
Well, Teklai, beyond food aid, I recall we've had this conversation, and access to medicines. What key steps do you think the Tigrayan forces and the central government should do to ensure a lasting peace?
Well, so following the letters of the agreement, if not the spirit, the two parties were expected to immediately stop using hostile propaganda against one another. But that hasn't, for the Tigrayan government has gone quiet following that. It hasn't been saying anything negative about the Ethiopian regime, but the Ethiopian regime has been on a continuous basis saying negative things about the Tigrayan party. So that's one thing that hasn't changed as far as the Ethiopian regime is concerned. Also, in terms of the humanitarian assistance and the other services, according to the agreement, these things were supposed to have started immediately after the signing of the agreement. So that was 13 or 14 days ago, but that hasn't happened. I know that Mukesh just said some humanitarian convoys have started to get into Tigray, but I think there is a very important caveat to add there. They started to areas controlled by the Amhara and the Eritrean forces in Western Tigray. And judging by what the two forces have been doing for the past 2 years, it's reasonable to expect that they are redistributing the aid to their own forces rather than to the Tigrayan people. An important thing to mention here is that nothing has got into the areas controlled by Tigrayan forces, so such as the capital city of Mekelle and central Tigray, nothing has got in. So even though a lot has been promised in the agreement, nothing has really changed in the ground as far as Tigray is concerned.
Let me bring in Professor Mukesh again. You've had Teklai. Many have said also that the people handling aid distribution and emergency interventions are mostly pro-Abiy Ahmed and are indifferent to the condition of the Tigrayans. This is one key issue that must also be brought to the table. Perhaps let us in on what you think should be the way out of this logjam, Mukesh.
Well, I think Teklai has a very good point. Some aid has come in, but if it is not going to all parts of Tigray, whoever controls it, then I think the spirit and the letter of the agreement is not yet been fulfilled. And the next day or two or week is going to be critical to make sure that all parts of Tigray are receiving assistance. That's one thing. The second thing is we have Eritrean forces still in the region, and without their departure, I do not think this peace is going to go anywhere. Thirdly, we have the issue of accountability and justice. In my experience of peace agreements around the world, and I've been dealing with this kind of areas for several decades, no peace process has ever succeeded without a track to do with justice and accountability. And while there are passing references to this in the initial documents, we wait to hear as to whether or not how it's going to be implemented. And without that, I don't think this is going to last. Having said all of that, it is still important that aid gets through and we have the conditions created where further dialogue can take place. Remember, this is not a peace agreement. It's a truce, and it is a truce for cessation of hostilities. And it is also the conditions for disarmament and so on have been laid out. But a lot has to be done in terms of putting them into practice. And I think the responsibility for this lies principally with the federal authorities in Addis.
And Teklai, from the conversation in South Africa, many are still, in the dark as to the nitty-gritty of the conversation. But again, Abiy Ahmed has said, well, to a large extent, he and his government will be honest enough to abide by the truce.
Well, I think it's very important to understand why the Ethiopian regime was forced to sign the agreement. They didn't go to South Africa in good faith. I think the reason the Ethiopian regime signed the agreement was to ward off possible sanctions from the US and from other bodies. So it was a tactic that the regime used to avoid possibilities for punishment. I think the official policy, and they say it a lot of times on their own media, as far as Tigray is concerned, remains to finish off the TPLF by using different means. So I don't think there is any appetite for peace in Addis Ababa, despite what the agreement says. But even the agreement, if you carefully read the document, one thing that you immediately realize is it's a document that is hastily written, and you don't really notice much thought after going to the statements and clauses that they have written. And also, Mukesh, I think briefly alluded to some point is the main task of overseeing whether or not the terms of agreement are being followed has been given to the African Union. And the African Union has been, for the most part, on the side of the Ethiopian regime. So it's almost impossible to see how fairness could be achieved in Tigray as long as the African Union is in charge of overseeing matters. And at any rate, the Ethiopian regime doesn't seem to be interested in pursuing honest peace in Tigray. But as far as the Tigrayan side is concerned, they didn't have much of an option when they went to South Africa. And I have said this many times, they were told that they needed to sign the agreement for Tigray to have any chance of receiving any aid. So they were told that aid was being conditioned on them signing or not signing the agreement. So that's what happened.
Well, Teklai Gebremichael and Professor Mukesh Kapila, many thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you.